Sometimes in politics, symbolism matters more than substance, and nowhere was that clearer than at the United Nations General Assembly this morning when President Erdogan of Turkey rose to deliver one of the most impassioned speeches of his career, only for the microphones to fail at the very moment he accused Israel of genocide in Gaza. For several minutes, the delegates were left staring at a silent figure gesturing from the famous green marble rostrum as the interpreter's voice cut out. Cannot hear the president, his voice is gone. Was this deliberate sabotage or a technical failure? The UN insists it was equipment malfunction, a quirk of automatic time limits. Turkish media predictably hinted at darker forces, but either way the symbolism was striking. The voice of Turkey momentarily muted just as Erdogan declared the massacre in Gaza, which has cost the lives of more than 65,000 people, continues with all its severity. No one who puts their hand on their conscience can accept what is happening. They cannot remain silent in the face of such genocide. The line was cut short, but the anger behind it reverberated, and the truth came across. Erdogan returned to his perennial slogan, "The world is bigger than five," his reminder that the UN Security Council cannot forever be left to the vetoes of five privileged powers. He accused Israel of turning Gaza into the world's largest cemetery for women and children, of killing more than 17,000 children, and of deliberately hitting hospitals, schools, and even UN facilities. He talked of children he talked of specifics of one girl whose family was killed and who was left to fend for herself for 12 days, and he didn't say what happened to her. Now, why does all this matter? Because Turkey occupies an unusual space in the international order. It is a NATO member, but it's one that buys missiles from Russia. It's a neighbour to Syria and Iraq, still scarred by war. It has direct stakes in the Black Sea through the Montreux Convention, which Erdogan pledged again to uphold in managing Russian and Ukrainian shipping. In his words, the war in Ukraine has been going on for 3 years, and we are still some way from establishing a permanent peace. We are determined to implement the Montreux Convention rigorously. That is not rhetoric. It is a reminder that Turkey quite literally holds the keys to the Bosphorus. And thus, Erdogan speaks about geography as much as ideology. I'm not talking about representing a country situated far away from tensions, but instead found at the very heart of tension and war. He was not exaggerating. To the south lies the devastation of Syria, to the east Iraq and Iran, to the north the Black Sea and the grinding war in Ukraine. Turkey stands adjacent to two active battlefronts, one in the Middle East, one in Europe, and tries to extract leverage from both. And Erdogan's speech also carried the long memory of empire. He reminded listeners that Turkey once sheltered Jews fleeing the Inquisition, and again during the Holocaust. We have no animosity towards the Jewish people, he said. Our problem is with the massacre policies of the Israeli government. In that sense, he sought to draw a line between anti-Semitism and the denunciation of Israel, a line that is so often blurred in the heat of Middle Eastern rhetoric. And it's important to note that distinction. I'm very pleased that he said this. Critics will say Erdogan is opportunistic, that he exploits the Palestinian cause to burnish his credentials at home and abroad. Supporters will say he alone speaks truth to a hypocritical West, which mourns Ukraine's suffering but tolerates Gaza's. Both views can be correct. What is beyond doubt is that Turkey has positioned itself as the conscience of the Muslim world at the UN, insisting on ceasefire, aid corridors, and a two-state solution with East Jerusalem as Palestine's capital. So, what should we take away from the glitches that cut short his words? Perhaps this: technology may silence a microphone, but it cannot mute the message. Erdogan's warning, what's happened in Palestine is a sign of a great moral collapse, was still heard. Turkey, with its 60,000 tons of aid to Gaza and its call for sanctions on Israel, is ensuring that its voice cannot be dismissed. And in the larger global frame, Turkey is not simply an outraged observer. It is a state that straddles continents, commands the Bosphorus, negotiates with Moscow, hosts NATO bases, and champions Palestine at the UN. That is why Erdogan's speech, truncated though it was, matters, because when Turkey speaks, the world has to listen, even if the sound system fails.